Evolution.org Hardcore 2.0 coming your way, episode 65. So this is going to be almost like a 3-part series. And the first 2 parts, we're going to talk specifically how to hijack your testosterone levels, compliments of EuroPharma. This is going to be the part 1, episode 65. And, in this one, look, we're going to do a 2-part series specifically, but it's really going to be, there's going to be a 3rd part as well, which is connected to these first 2. And look, Mobster and I, we're going to go over how to hijack your testosterone levels. We're going to go over things you can do in your life to control that can help with your testosterone levels. We're going to go over what to look for in blood work. Okay, that's an important component, because a lot of people, they come on the forum and they're like, I got blood work done. What do I need to get in addition? So we're going to show you that. And we're also going to talk about a little bit about EuroPharmacies during this and tell you how good they are. So let's start with testosterone 101. What is testosterone? And testosterone is the male hormone. It's present in both genders. It's most dominant hormone in males. Obviously, with males, our testosterone levels are much higher than females, but females also need testosterone. So if you're a female listener, or you have a wife or a girlfriend, you got to understand they also have testosterone. They also need testosterone, just like males also need estrogen. And females obviously need estrogen. So testosterone is produced differently. With males, it's produced through our testes, which is our Leydig cells. So the balls, and they're fed by our pituitary glands. With females, it's different. They're mostly producing testosterone by their ovaries. So normal testosterone levels in males in the United States can range from 300 nanograms per deciliter up to 850 nanograms per deciliter. But that's a wide disparity. So the reason it's such a wide disparity is we're going to get into that. You can be at 800 and not feel so good, and you can be at 350 and feel fantastic. So it's very important not to get too caught up in these numbers. But this is the normal range. Like if you go to a legitimate doctor, not an anti-aging clinic, you go to him, you have 400 test levels, and you're like, well, I want to go on TRT the rest of my life. I'm 25 years old. A good doctor will tell you, no, I don't want you going on TRT. I want you optimizing your testosterone. A doctor who's just trying to get the money off of you, like from an anti-aging clinic, he's going to be like, yeah, let's put you on TRT. Even I've had clients come to me with 800 or 700 testosterone levels, and they went to the anti-aging clinic and they actually got put on TRT, which put their testosterone levels back to 700 or 800. How does that make any sense? So that's, you know what I'm saying? So you've got exogenous hormones that you can take, and you've got the hormones that your body produces. So go ahead, Mobster, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, we just this forum, Steve, looking at some of the posts this morning, 7 o'clock this morning, when I was on Evolutionary, and we saw that a member had been to a clinic, and they would put the first dose was 300 milligrams of testosterone a week, and yourself, myself, and a bunch of others who'd already responded were like, "That's crazy." You and I have talked about the typical levels. There are very rare few, and I said this, when you look at the average numbers of dosages that clinics give you, it's somewhere between 70 and 120 milligrams. 120 milligrams a week is typical. A few, maybe 20, 30% might need 200. And I'm going to say it's sub 5%, maybe 1 or 2% even, Steve, that go to the extremes of needing 300 milligrams. And that didn't seem to be the case with the member in question, because we looked at some of the other stuff that they've given us, some of the other information about their condition, about how they look, and so on and so forth. So Steve said sometimes when we talked about these kind of clinics, they are there to make money. And they would talk about coming in, getting this customer, this member, to come in every week for the 300 milligram shot. It seemed to me a little bit lazy, Steve, and a phrase that we touched upon early on with regards to legitimate doctors, a proper endocrinologist. And in fact, let me just use the UK example, Steve, the NHS. It's extremely rare for our National Health Service to put men on TRT. And they would absolutely be looking at putting you into the normal range. This is not going to make you a beast in the gym. It's not going to make you want to go out and kick ass. It's not going to transform your life. It's literally, let's just get this person, this man, back into range. And that might not be actually the reason that he went to see the endocrinologist or spoke to his GP and got the NHS treatment in the first place. So yeah, there's a huge hang up, which Steve and I are going to talk about this in regards to the numbers. And Steve's touched upon this already, right? So while the nanograms per deciliter is a measure, especially, Steve, when a person's on cycle, and the most useful measure when they're on cycle really is A, that the number's gone up, and B, that the steroids, the PEDs that they're using are legitimately good, because we see on the uncapped measures sometimes numbers in excess of 2,000, 3,000 nanograms a deciliter. The problem is, and it can be a little bit confusing, and I don't want to come across too much in a particularly negative way, that people can get hung up on this. And specifically, and Steve will explain an example of why in a minute. So, for example, I've used myself as an analogy, as an example, proof of the pudding, so to speak, Steve. I don't think, based on some of the indicators for what high testosterone levels would have normally anyway, that I have especially high testosterone levels. What would indicators be? It might be being specifically hirsute. It might be overly deep voice. It might be that quote unquote swagger, extreme confidence, and all this combined with a relatively lean, muscular body. Now, unfortunate that I've probably got a couple of those, but I'm not especially hirsute. I don't think I'm especially aggressive for the most part, and so on and so forth. So I exhibit a couple of high T levels, but the rest of it not. And because I'm more of a lifter than a bodybuilder, while you can see certain muscles on me pop from time to time, I've also got the ice cream powered belly, Steve. So, because I don't need to be lean to be a lifter, and so on and so forth. So I've said to Steve before, when we've done these kind of shows, and again on the forums, I suspect my own blood nanograms a deciliter of testosterone levels are probably in the mid-range. In fact, arguably slightly less than the mid-range. Perfectly normal, still in range, but it's my response to and aspects of my lifestyle and the fact that I lift, and of course my awareness of diet and so forth, which we're going to get into, that enables me to maximize what I get with what I've got and how I feel with what I've got, versus, as Steve said, someone with high testosterone levels who can feel like shit. People, and Steve will touch upon this in a minute, that are on TRT and still don't feel as good as they ought to, and someone that, like myself and others, who might have arguably levels that are in range and yet feel great. And I'll finish this a little bit as well, Steve. We occasionally get what I would think of as a younger person, 23, 24, 25, 26 years of age, and they come on, and for one reason or another, they've gone up and they've had a full-blown medical test. That's heart, lungs, bloods, the lot. I've had a couple of these, Steve, just for being over 50 years of age. And included in that test was measures of testosterone in their blood. Their blood was looked at for lipids, was there markers for potential kidney and liver issues, and so on and so forth. I've had those. And they were surprised that their levels were arguably towards the lower end of the range. And immediately they come on the forums and they'll say something like, I've just seen my numbers, it's under 300. Do you guys think I should need to get on TRT? Do you think I should be using testosterone? Do I need a testosterone booster? Now, here's the thing, Steve. Perhaps they didn't feel like low T guys until they saw the number. Is there aspects of their lifestyle, which again we're going to get into, that they could improve just to feel better with the levels that they've got? They also need to understand that just because they are towards the lower end of the range, they are still in range. If you get 100 guys and you line them up, even 100 muscular guys and line them up, I would hazard a guess, Steve, that there'll be ranges up and down the spectrum from one end of the 100 to the other end of the 100. That could be 300 nanograms a deciliter difference from one person to the next. And yet an observer standing in front of them would look at them and say, every single one of these is a trained athlete, every single one of these is muscular, every single one of these is exhibiting high T, so hairy, muscular, confident, swagger, etc., etc., etc. But the range will vary. Of course it varies. In the same, the 100 fellas lined up, Steve, would be different heights. You're not all going to look the same. You're not all going to feel the same, and so on and so forth. So don't get hung up too much if you are in range, but you do feel good.
And not everybody, look, not everybody is born to have high testosterone levels. I've seen guys with 900, 1,000 natural testosterone levels. They're just, it's just the way it is. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. I used to play poker with a bunch of older dudes. These are wealthy older guys. They basically, their life, they were retired. Their life was basically playing poker and going out on the boat and going fishing and stuff like that. That's the lifestyle they lived. And they could barely walk. And they
Mm,
were bald and they were fat, but they were on
yeah.
TRT and they had testosterone levels that were high for someone who was in their 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, but they still were not in good shape. So it's what you do with your testosterone levels is more important. Give me someone
Yes.
with 400 testosterone levels who has optimal health and who's on point with
Yes.
everything over
Yes.
someone who's on TRT with 1,000 testosterone levels. So that's what we're gonna get
Let me
into
let me
on this
expand just
one.
for a second there, Steve. Sorry. And here's the thing, guys, and I think the takeaway is going to be two things from this show. One is specifically, well, let me think three takeaways. One is don't get too hung up on the number if you feel okay. Two, there are things you can do to make yourself feel better with the T levels you've got. And three, and this is what we're really going to get into as much at the end of this show as we will into the second show, and that is how those changes, those tweaks will actually mean you will get better results when you go on cycle. So that's that. Those three are the big numbers that you come. And like I said to Stephen at pre-show, you're listening to the show for this very reason, to get these cheat codes, to get these shortcuts, and to understand how optimizing these things for you will benefit you both off cycle and on cycle. Back to you, Steve.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I can look at two perspectives. I can look at it as, there's too many people that think that I can just go and raise my testosterone levels and everything will be okay in my life.
Yes,
My
yes,
depression is going to be cured. My sex drive is going to be cured. Everything's going to be
yeah,
peachy dandy. I'm going to pick up more women or men,
yeah,
whatever. And it's just not the case in most situations. A lot of times it's not, if it's specifically your testosterone levels that is wrong and everything else is perfect in your life, then yes, getting your testosterone levels will magically fix everything, right? But most of the time it's multiple things going on. You're overstressed, you've got a wife, 3 kids, 2 mortgages,
dude, yeah,
3 cars, a
yeah,
boat, and
college
you're just
funds,
overloaded your life. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? And we see this all the time in America. I don't know how it is in Britain, Mobster, but in
same,
America,
same, mate,
the
same, same.
suburban lifestyle in America, if you poll people, and I've had friends who have been in this situation, they're miserable. And the husbands end up leaving the wife, and then 2 weeks later, the wife has a new boyfriend and the husband has a new girlfriend. And you know what I'm saying? And then the 3 kids have to grow up, with divorced parents. We see that all the time in America. What happened there? And then 2 years later, the husband leaves the girlfriend, and then a year later, the woman leaves the boyfriend, and then they're back to being miserable. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like you always want the opposite. So it's very, very important before you make that decision that, yeah, I want to get my testosterone levels up. Let's focus on, let's get everything else in my life fixed first, and maybe things will fall into place better. So at the
Let
end
me
of the
give,
day,
let
that's
me give
one
you
perspective. Yeah, go ahead.
just an example here in the UK here, Stephen, exactly the same. Although I think in terms of the overall debt, we are slightly better, but not by much, really. We have two actual government indicators for poverty here in the United Kingdom that people don't understand, really. That's probably because I'm an older guy. Let me give you two of these examples, Steve. If you have a 55-inch or less TV, so 40-inch, 28-inch, whatever television, that's an indicator for poverty. Motherfucker, you got a color TV. What's your problem? And the other one was, and I thought this is amusing because I think the TV I've got upstairs is years old, Steve. I haven't got a flat screen, an LCD, a plasma, or nothing. When it blows up, I'll go out and get one. But in the meantime, so I've got an indicator for poverty right there. And the other indicator for poverty, which also applies to me, is you don't have a PlayStation or an Xbox. That is an indicator for poverty here in the United Kingdom. Motherfucker, I haven't got even a 55-inch TV, and I haven't got a PlayStation. I haven't got a games machine. So apparently, I'm poor. So the part of the problem, and this is the lifestyle choices, without nagging it too much, is that we tend to sort of try to follow everybody else and put ourselves into situations for things that we can't afford, like going to Disney or whatever, obsessing over those particular things and thinking that you're poor when you are in reality, both in America and the United Kingdom, amongst the top 5%, with or without those things, Steve, of the wealthiest motherfuckers on the planet just for your lifestyle. But we stress over them. And trust me, that stress, that pressure that you're putting onto yourself, that trying to measure up with the Joneses, when in reality you should be comparing yourself to the rest of the fucking planet, is actually stressing you the fuck out. The bills are stressing you the fuck out. The need to do these things are stressing you the fuck out. And trust me, if you guys, especially, obviously in this example for the podcast, it's having an effect on your testosterone levels. So I'm going to quote Disney: "Let it go. Don't stress over that kind of stuff." But yes, those lifestyle choices, and we're going to get into the diet and other aspects of lifestyle.
Yeah. There's no reason for you guys listening to this. You're in your early 20s. You go get blood work done. You're like, oh my God, my testosterone levels are low for my age. Your testosterone levels haven't reached peak. That's another thing I want to include.
Yeah.
Testosterone levels don't start peaking. Some of you, it may not be to your late 20s. So your body's still going through a developmental phase. So don't, hey, the more you stress out over it, the more you'll drive down your test levels,
ironically. That's it, Steve, ironically.
And your testosterone levels fluctuate day by day and by hour by hour.
From morning to evening.
Yeah. So here's
literally
the thing.
Morning to evening, yeah.
So on the flip side, let's move on to the next one. What are some of the side effects of low testosterone that could be existing out there? And we're going to go over each of these, Mobster. Why don't you touch on the first couple?
Yeah, look, right. So number one, decreased sex drive. I'm reminded of the magazine articles in Cosmos, Steve, where it was all measures of sex drive and all how often you copulate, how many women you pull, how many men you pull, etc., are all verbalized, and no one's following you around with a stick counting you. So the Cosmo and all the other means and measures of doing it were always based on what men said and what women said, and most men exaggerate. Most women would less the number because they didn't want to come across in a certain particular way. But basically, compared to where you was before, or compared to where you've had higher testosterone levels in the past, you won't want to fuck as much. It's as simple as that, Steve. So that's number one. Number two, and you and I have talked about this in other shows, erectile dysfunction. I think Steve said on a previous show just recently that the market for ED, erectile dysfunction drugs in America, is huge. Ironically, there are younger people using it to and obviously enhance their sex life when they've got perfectly normal testosterone levels. And it's just as big of a market, especially people my age, Steve, 50 plus, here in the United Kingdom. And of course, just the price of the ED drugs is coming down. It's become a thing to use these, whether you need to do it or not. And in fact, I've actually argued that you should only wait until you need to use these kind of drugs. Absolutely. I mean, look, who doesn't want a great Saturday night? That kind of thing. So it's a measure, but definitely it'll be a measure of compare it to yourself. When you were super healthy, when you were super fit, when you were super lean, when you exercised, when you ran, when you ate healthily, your sex drive ought to be higher. And then when you don't do those things, it should be lower. And the other issue, of course, Steve, is age range. I would absolutely look. Let me give you a slightly crude example. There's kind of sort of tongue-in-cheek jokes about when you're a teenager getting an erection when the wind changed. And obviously your sex drive, especially in your late teens, early 20s, mid-20s, should be way higher than someone who's 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 years of age. So again, decreased sex drive is compared to yourself, and especially arguably compared to people at the same age as you. So that's another one. Touch upon the next couple, Steve.
So fertility. Now, this isn't directly due to low testosterone, but it is a byproduct of it, because if you've got low testosterone, that means you have some type of HPTA dysfunction going on. So obviously your testes aren't producing the amount of sperm you're supposed to. So that's just a indirect byproduct of having low testosterone and a poor HPTA. Your pituitary glands aren't functioning correctly. Well, the pituitary glands don't produce sperm. Well, the pituitary glands produce hormones, which feed your testes, which produce the sperm. So you see that's all connected. It's connected there, even if it's not directly. You wanted to say something, Mobster?
Yeah, there's one just there, Stephen. Slightly off topic, and I mean a tiny bit in terms of infertility. Steve and I are big on not having you use steroids too soon. We talk about the impact of using steroids on your hepatitis, specifically your ability to be fertile. There are two issues here, Steve. One which occurs to me is, and I've referenced this person before, and he's talked about it, so it's not a sort of a hidden thing or anything. The local former IFBB pro required fertility treatment for him and his wife to have a child, and they've just literally announced that they're having a second child. And I know that they've had to pay some thousands of pounds, certainly probably close to $10,000 just for the first child to have that. And the other issue is, and this is actually becoming more and more true in the educated classes, people who've been to college and university are more career-minded, are leaving it later to have kids. And the later they leave it, especially if you get to 40 years of age, the less fertile you are. As Steve said, it's an indirect connection between fertility levels and arguably T levels. Basically, Steve, is going to come down to something as crude as if you're not ready to fuck, you ain't going to fuck. If you're not fucking, you're not going to have kids. Simple as that. But obviously, it's coming to the issue of the ladies, the older ladies. You've only got a certain number of eggs to begin with, ladies, and obviously, the later you leave it, the less there is. And the same thing with the men in terms of low sperm count being indirectly connected to low testosterone levels. Back to you again.
So next things, we're talking about muscle gain issues. Now, why is that? Because testosterone helps your muscle cells maintain strength and the integrity of your muscle fiber. So if your androgen receptors don't get enough testosterone, your muscle cells can't maintain your muscle fibers. So you start getting degradation of that. And then on the flip side, fat gain. So when your muscle mass declines, your metabolism slows down. In a low testosterone state, the domino effect causes your weight to go up. It causes fat to accumulate, and your metabolism basically, it's like a double-edged sword, like where your metabolism slows down. So it becomes easier for you to gain fat, in the process. So this is the whole stereotype of the fat guy who sits in his mom's basement playing video games all day on his headphones, and and he's got a big gut, and he just
orders enough sunlight, doesn't get enough fresh air.
He orders pizza for lunch. That's all he eats is pizza and Pop-Tarts all day. That's the whole stereotype rings true here, because basically he's got, now it's not the low testosterone that caused that, it's the lifestyle that caused a low testosterone, but it becomes a domino effect where he's going to continue to gain fat, lose muscle, and get lower and lower testosterone to the point where he gets the next one where it's poor energy and motivation, and that's connected. A lot of that is the mental aspect of it, in the process. And again, as Mobster said, as you get older, your testosterone levels naturally drop, and that's just how it is. As human beings, we historically have only lived, till
35 years of age. She was old.
So so I mean, obviously now people are living much older because of advancements in technology and medicine. So obviously your testosterone levels will begin dropping as you get older. So let's talk about, Mobster. Let's move on to the next topic. We spent a lot of time on that first topic explaining what testosterone is and some of the things to look for. But let's talk about a positive route. Let's talk about how to get your testosterone levels up naturally. So look, there's going to be some strategies that you need to work on. If you're listening to this and your testosterone levels, you want to optimize your testosterone levels. I don't care if your testosterone levels are at 300 or they're at 800. You want to optimize them, and you want
how you feel on high T, how to boost your to higher levels. Literally, as I said earlier on, the better response when you're in the gym, the better response when you do go into PEDs. This is literally, and I use this phrase earlier on, Steve, it's a shortcut, it's a cheat code. And again, we sometimes see this on the forums where someone comes on, and if they're really good and they're properly honest, which always helps when it comes to giving you advice, if you're 25% body fat, if your lifestyle's poor, you are doing yourself a disservice. And again, you're listening to this show, so you want to know these things. Let me start straight away, Steve. And number one should be kind of obvious, guys. Again, because you're listening to the show, I suspect you already hit the gym. You need to exercise. And I don't just mean the gym. I mean going out and getting your daily steps, literally being outside in the fresh air and whatever else. So whether it's jogging, whether it's running, whether it's in the gym on a treadmill, whether it's rowing, you need to be cardiovascular fit, but you also need to exercise. And that's kind of obvious. But again, the more you do those things obviously not up to the point of overtraining, but the better, fitter, more muscular you are to begin with. And that's because of your lifestyle, because you're hitting the gym, the better your response to the testosterone levels that you have will be. And at the same time, it is as likely that you will also increase your testosterone, naturally occurring testosterone levels. And obvious, so the next part of that would be being healthy, and that's kind of obvious again. If you, and I'll use myself as a silly little example, Steve. If I have an identical twin, I don't, but if I had one, and he sat around the house more, and he didn't go out and get his steps, and I did, and he ate nothing but fried food, and I had a little bit of fried food now and again, but I ate more greens. I hit the gym more. I didn't miss a session. I literally went out in the sunshine and the fresh air. Trust me, just that vitamin D and being it and the sunshine is a boost. There's the difference between being sluggish in the winter and being more active in the summer. And those are real simple fixes straight away. Literally going from maybe 2 sessions a week in the gym to 3, doing a tiny bit more cardio so that your actual cardiovascular fitness is a little bit better, getting measures on your blood pressure, getting measures on your heart rate, and seeing that your rest and heart rate's going down, seeing how you recover quickly after training because your cardiovascular fitness is better. So you can have 180 heartbeats a minute when you're actually running like the clappers, and then within a couple of minutes it's back down to normal, and so on and so forth. Those in and of themselves would be great means and methods to make you feel better on the testosterone levels that you do have, and at the same time to boost your testosterone levels. And as I said, especially in part 2 and part 3, we'll talk about specifically how the same will be better for you in terms of the results that you'll get from using PEDs. I'll let Steve talk about the next couple of subjects.
Yeah, and the next thing, we're gonna kind of get into here, Mobster mentioned exercise, and look, at the end of the day, I hate to be like cliche oriented, but why would your body produce hormones if it doesn't need them? Like, if you're not out there and you don't need to produce the hormones, why? So obviously being healthy is very, very important. Having less body fat is very, very important. You got to get your body fat down. If you're too fat, your body does a lot of things where it says, you know what, I don't need this, I don't need that. So your body says, you know what, this person has a lot of energy, stored energy on their body. They don't have to go find food. They don't have to go hunt. So
Yes.
why would I produce hormones if this person doesn't need them? Because he obviously is getting plenty of food. So why would I need to produce it? So there's a lot of things that go on mentally, physically. It's not just testosterone, but it all ties into it.
Steve, let's use the primitive man analogy that you and I have used a couple of times in shows before. Quite simply, testosterone levels, especially in primitive man, was for several things. One was hunting. If you don't want to go hunt because your T levels are low versus hunting, you're not literally going to go to get the food. That's what Steve's getting at. Number 2 would be, again, a low T primitive man is not going to get that ass. He's not, right? He's not going to be procreating with the fertile women of the tribe. That's just how it is. His desire to get up and go get some ass, and some desire to go get up and hunt that antelope is just going to not be there. And we talk about this in a couple of shows, and I'll just finish this little bit here with this, Steve. We are not that far removed from being the primitive man that we once were. We might be able to talk better, we might have access to greater information, but our bodies aren't that greatly removed from primitive caveman in terms of the things that we need to do, in terms of quote unquote hunting. So Steve's quite right. If we don't need to go hunt because there's food in the freezer and food in the fridge, and if we don't need to go hunt because our body's holding body fat, and our body knows that we're holding body fat, then I don't need this guy to have high T levels to go out and catch food. I don't need him to have high T levels because he's got a bit of ass sitting next to him on the sofa. Whereas back in the day, there was always competition. Even if you was with this woman, someone else would be sniffing around it, so to speak. So again, high T levels to protect your children, to protect, fight for the tribe, to fight to make sure no one else was procreating with your missus. That's the reason why you had high T levels back in the day. It's really ironic, Steve. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe there have been studies of indicators for testosterone levels in primitive man. Trust me, they are higher than a lot of guys now for those very reasons that we've just talked about.
I've used the analogy before back in your people, Mobster, because a lot of people associate, Britain with kings and queens and all that stuff. But your people, if you go back 500 years ago and they did testosterone levels, I bet you the peasants that were out there doing the battles and manning the fields, they had higher testosterone levels than the kings and queens.
Do you know we
because
used to eat 6,000 calories a day, Steve, in the Middle Ages versus the 2,500, 3,000 we have now, simply because we were that physically more active. There's an indicator for saying that we used to go to sleep immediately the sun went down, but we'd actually wake up midnight to eat. And of course, the food that we was eating, people imagine it was really simple, but you were burning the fuck out of the food that you was eating because you were grafting morning from the sun, when the sun went up to the sun went down. You literally lived with the animals that you had. All the food that you ate was probably produced by you, so naturally fresh and organic, etc., etc. And with the exception, obviously, when we started to preserve food and so on and so forth, arguably the diet was better for us, and especially for an active lifestyle that we had. And with maybe the thing that we were shorter, and the other issue, of course, being disease, the habits of middle-aged Britain. I'm sorry, the Middle Ages British. Never mind the rest of the world. We'd bath once a fucking year, Steve. We didn't have showers. We did not have inside toilets, and so on and so forth. So disease was still a massive issue, but we actually ate better, probably had better bone density, and certainly we were burning the fuck out of those calories by working 10, 12 hours, as long as the sun was up. And so obviously less in the winter time and more in the summertime. We worked with nature.
well, your
And we were still
ancestors, you guys had to climb all those stairs to get in the castle to get to the top. You didn't have elevators.
That's the rich motherfuckers and the servants, the rich motherfuckers. The rest of us lived in fucking shitholes. Animals downstairs, and you'd live in literally you lived in what was amounted to a barn. Animals downstairs, food stored downstairs, and the family would live up in what
Wait a
would be
minute, I
now.
thought you lived in a castle. Every
Yeah.
American thinks
I live in a very big building, but we're talking about 500 or 600 years ago. I mean, look, think about the diet, because I want to touch on the diet now, Steve. We talk about specific high T foods. A couple of these are really obvious, guys, but like some of them are less so. Now, look at your diet, and especially if you are listening to this show and you do have low testosterone levels, look at the diet, look at what you're eating, and compare it to the list that I'm about to suggest. So, specific dietary foods which encourage high testosterone levels, or certainly a boost in the naturally occurring testosterone levels, are oysters, onions, Brazil nuts, broccoli, eggs, fatty fish and tuna, bananas, avocados. And note, most of those are rich in magnesium, zinc, and potassium. We know for a fact that zinc helps. It's in pretty much every testosterone booster that's out there, including ones that we've mentioned on previous shows. But think about the list of foods I give. I don't eat enough bananas, Steve. I might have eggs in one or two things. I do have a bit of fatty fish now and again. I like onions. I don't have a problem with onions. I could eat more nuts. And I eat oysters. It's like drinking snot. I can't stand them. But how great is the reputation with oysters for increasing your sex drive? It's been a known aphrodisiac one way or another for millions of years, certainly the last 1,000+ years. So again, compare that to your diets. And here's an obvious thing here, Steve, and we talked about this on other shows. You should be preparing these foods for yourself as much as you possibly can versus buying them. So, for example, Steve, let's touch on the fatty fish, right? You can get fish in the supermarkets, you can get fish from fishmongers, but if it's fried, if it's been treated in some way, if it's covered in some sort of sweet sauce, it's not going to be as good for you as, for example, just grilled salmon.
Yeah, or farmed, farmed as well.
Oh yeah, the
They're
more
feeding the
you
fish.
touch on this, the more organic, the better it's been looked after, the better it's been produced.
Yeah.
If it walks around, the more it walks around and not standing still in its own filth in some sort of.
You gotta make sure that what you're eating is being fed, because the farmed fish, they feed them absolute shit. So it's gonna be way worse for you. It's gonna hurt you more than help you. And then
fresh, not frozen. Yeah,
I would
organic.
argue avoiding certain foods is crucial, because you got to avoid certain things. Now, there's been a lot of things about soy, and I've seen both sides of the argument. So I'm not convinced either way. But look, at the end of the day, soybean oil, it's in a lot of stuff. Avoid it. It's refined. It's garbage. You want to avoid soybean oil. Alcohol, obviously. I mean, I don't think anyone is dumb enough to argue that alcohol has any health benefits. And then in general, the crappy food, like the fast food, the junk foods, the refined sugars, refined oils, all these other crap that you should be eliminated regardless. And then sleep. And sleep is crucial, Mobster, before we get into supplements. Sleep is crucial. Look, and here's why. When you sleep, that's when your
you recover.
body repairs and recovers everything in your body, not just
including your balls, including your
yes.
Leydig cells, including the fact that you might have procreated with the missus before you went to sleep and your body's just recovering. It's kind of obvious, Steve. Listen, right? And again, I don't want to be too preachy. I go to bed relatively early. I might read, but I'm probably asleep by 9 o'clock at night, Steve, maybe 10 o'clock at the latest. And I'm up before 6 in the morning most days. I certainly wake before 6 in the morning most days. So I'm definitely getting 6, 7, 8, 9 hours sleep all the time. Right now, I've lived the other way when I've worked like a motherfucker back in the day. And a lot of people still do this. And we do it because of Netflix. We do it because of Amazon. We do it because of whatever. And ironically, you don't need to. You can watch pretty much anything you want to watch at any time, whenever you want to watch it. That's not the case as it used to be, say, 10, 15 years ago. So there's no need for you to stay up late and only getting 4, 5, 6 hours sleep. Some of you will be working double hard. I've done it back in the day, the long days, the 12, 15, even 18-hour days. That might come down to certain lifestyle choices, but we could be sure to try and get sleep. Switch off. Steve's touched on this, and I'll finish on this very quickly, Steve. Blackout curtains, blinds, whatever, so that you have a dark room, and switch your goddamn motherfucking phones off, or at least put them on mute and face down. The little blue light that comes off of mobile phones and the habits that we have, including myself, of playing with our bloody phones when we're in bed, never mind watching TV or staying up late or whatever else, or being overstimulated. It's not good for your sleep. Your sleep is super, super important in dealing with some of the things that we've touched upon and enhancing your testosterone levels. Let's move on, Steve.
Yeah. And then one more point on that. I don't keep any electronics in my room. I don't do anything. No TV, no electronics. So that's a huge. My girlfriend, she used to complain. She's like, "What happens if something happens to me? You don't have the phone in the room, and I have to call you." And I said, if it's an emergency, call 911. All right. I'm not gonna be able to help you anyway when I'm in the middle of sleep. If you're trying to call me, if something's happening to you, if someone's trying to abduct you, call 911. I'm not gonna be able to help you. Phone needs to be off and not in the room at all. Okay. If there's an emergency, someone can come fucking ring your doorbell and wake you up or throw a rock at your window. So it doesn't have to be in your room. Supplements, mobster, supplements. You want to talk about these supplements?
Yes, I mean, we've discussed,
that we
we've
haven't
done a bunch of,
discussed.
yeah, we've done a bunch of shows, guys, but I'll touch upon the main ingredients. But we've done a bunch of shows on a specific testosterone boosting products, and we've talked about the ingredients. So let me just touch upon the main ingredients that you should see in any testosterone booster. And these are super, super important. Again, this is not a shortcut in and of itself. It's going to enhance what you're doing if you're doing the other things that we've already talked about. Again, that shortcut / cheat code. Keep that in mind. So you're looking for dosia, tribulus, vitamin E. I've just mentioned zinc a couple of minutes ago, fenugreek, and tonga alley. Every single one of those ingredients, and you can do your own research, so it's not just Mobster talking out of his ass, bigging up products, etc., etc. Every single one of those ingredients should be in various proportions in a testosterone boosting product, and every single one, if you go and check, has been proven to have an effect on positive effect, mind you, on your testosterone levels. And I'm like I said, Steve, I mean, Tribulus, I've done like 5 and 10 minutes on a couple of shows, specifically on the Tribulus terrastis, I think is the right way of saying the second part of that name, how it came to be discovered, the boost that it had on the athletes that it was being tested with, the quality of the ingredients that were being tested versus, different parts of the plants and so on and so forth. Vitamin E, we know, is great for your skin. Zinc, I've talked about specifically I've even talked about a cheat code for that, Steve, when I turned around and said I've done tricks with my buddies where you super boosted zinc temporarily and produced more cum, the actual sperm, the fluid, for a couple of days because you boosted your zinc. And we know it's great for repairing muscle tissue and so on and so forth. And then tonga alley, I said of some of the ingredients we talked about, how they were discovered, how they were isolated, how they explorers were going around the world and looking and saying, why is these natives got great skin? Why is these natives so healthy? How come, they're producing all these kids on these tropical islands? Look at this plant. And this plant, you chew it, you make a tea out of it, and they brought it back, and then they realized how fantastic it was at boosting testosterone levels. Included also, Steve, magnesium, vitamin D, fish oil, calcium, and boron. Boron's incredibly well known. Let's talk about the difference between testosterone, or specifically total testosterone, Steve, bound and free testosterone.
Okay, so as mentioned earlier, we talked about the normal testosterone levels can range from about 300 nanograms per deciliter, depending, and up to 150 nanograms per deciliter. So age, other factors, it depends. Now, free testosterone normal range is 3.5 to 15.5 nanograms per deciliter, or 10 to 45 PMOL per deciliter, um, which is picomoles per milliliter. And look, when you get blood tests in the United States, in most situations, almost all situations, you're gonna have to ask your doctor, and or pay. You're gonna have to pay more to get your free testosterone check. So total testosterone usually comes included. Obviously, it's gonna come included with a basic hormone panel when you get your blood work done. But to get free testosterone check, it's gonna cost more. It's gonna cost like 3 times the amount. So you're gonna have to have to get that added. So free testosterone measures only the active form of testosterone. So I've seen enough blood work. In most situations, your total testosterone is going to be normal. Your free testosterone is going to be normal too, and so on. So if it's low, then they're both going to be low. If it's high, then they're both going to be high. Obviously, if you're on an anabolic steroid cycle, they're both going to be high. Okay. Some situations, though, I've seen you may have normal testosterone levels, but lower free testosterone. So there are ways to boost your free testosterone. So we're going to get into that, not just on this episode, but we're also going to get into that in the next couple episodes that we talk about, and especially in the next one we do, Mobster, which is part 2. So go ahead, Mobster. Touch on that. And look, at the bottom line is, when it comes to using, when it comes to free and total testosterone, free testosterone is all that counts. Go ahead, Mobster.
Yes, yeah. I mean, here's the thing, guys, and Steve's touched upon this when he's talked about blood tests. He's actually got a couple of threads on that specific subject on the forums. This is probably, again, it's one of those things slightly confusing for some people. But basically, what you're really looking for is to, and we're really going to get into sort of freeing up, arguably, Steve, band testosterone, and certainly boosting your free testosterone numbers. Again, more in the second part of and again, possibly also in the third part. So it's literally going to come down to, let me just paraphrase that again. The more free testosterone you have, the better results you're going to have. The more you can boost that, the better results you're going to have. The more you add to it when you use anabolic steroids, the better results you're going to have. But it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you need to use more anabolic steroids to get great results, because as we discussed at the beginning of the show, the things that you can do to have a better lifestyle, a better diet, and less stress will boost your testosterone, but it will also boost specifically, and this is the most important part, the free testosterone. EuroPharmacies, and I think specifically the person that actually wanted us to do this series of shows, really wanted us to emphasize, and I think it's important to emphasize it now to the listeners, what you can do to free up and what you can do to boost that free testosterone in order to get absolutely best results. So again, look, if you're listening to this show, you go to the gym. If you're listening to this show, you're kind of aware that you need to have better, healthier lifestyles, and some of you already will. But more than that, you are looking to get the maximum benefit from what you do in the gym in order to produce a more muscular physique, a healthier physique, and without needing to be on grams and grams and grams, as we know some professional bodybuilders and a few, one or two amateur bodybuilders are using, or athletes for that matter, Steve, grams and grams of testosterone in order to get pro-like results. So what can you do and how you can do that to increase the free testosterone to get best results, but without needing to be on grams, is probably the number one takeaway that you should get from this show, both in this part and the next part, and hopefully also in part 3. Back to you, Steve.
You've got bound testosterone and unbound testosterone. You got total testosterone and free testosterone. That's how I can paraphrase it. At the end of the day, the free testosterone is what counts. I can't stress that enough. So even if your testosterone levels are normal, if your free testosterone levels are low, you're just not going to get the results you're looking for. So it's very important that you get those numbers up for free testosterone. So some facts on free testosterone. Look, it's very important to have proper free testosterone. Libido, muscle growth, prevention of osteoporosis, spermatogenesis, all the stuff we talked about earlier. Very crucial when it comes to getting your free testosterone levels where they need to be. And when your free testosterone levels are low, you're going to rapidly start noticing that what we talked about earlier in terms of all that stuff, the decreased sex drive, the erectile dysfunction, the infertility, the inability to burn fat, the inability to build muscle, the inability to build strength, no energy, no motivation, all that stuff will rapidly have a domino effect. And a lot of people, a lot of times they'll get their, this is a mistake I see, Mobster. A lot of times people will get their numbers checked and they'll just check testosterone. Their testosterone levels will be at 400, 450. All right, that's all right. That's a decent number, right? But then their free testosterone levels will be either barely within the lower end of the range or they'll be low. And then they're like, well, I got problems. And then they get the numbers checked again, and their total testosterone levels maybe 25 points higher, maybe going from 450 to 475. But their free testosterone actually goes lower, but they don't know that because they're not getting their free testosterone checked.
Yes, I mean, your local GP, or what you would have called it in the States, an MD, Steve, may not have done sufficient studying when they were qualifying to become a doctor in order for them to properly understand it, which is why we talked about necessarily talking to an expert. And an expert in blood, in the measures of blood and the indicators for blood, would be an endocrinologist, and not necessarily someone like a GP or a medical doctor. So, and insurance companies might not necessarily require you to go off and get the right kind of blood tests. You can get them for a decent price. Steve talks about this on the forums. And we're in our own little particular way, Steve. We've not just ourselves, but other members of the forums have become really, really good at reading them. And it can be quite complicated in their own particular ways and how you're supposed to read it and understand what you're looking at and so on and so forth. People will ask us, oh, I've got kidney numbers that come back. What can I do? Very rarely are they asking about lifestyle changes. 9 times out of 10, they want a supplement. And while they can help, the lifestyle changes and the supplement would be better for that. The same thing applies to boosting your testosterone levels. The fix of lifestyle, diets, reduce your stress, and using testosterone boosters. And then, obviously, as we're going to get into now, specifically PEDs. Let me just give you an example of how, as Steve said, the total testosterone can be confusing. And we actually did a whole show on this particular person. It was a professional bodybuilder who passed away. And we were able to, everybody, because it was out there on the internet, was able to see the blood test results that were taken at the autopsy after he died. And he had crazy elevated, this was very short time after he passed away, crazy elevated testosterone levels. And specifically, they also tested for steroids because he was a competing professional bodybuilder. And the reason they think his testosterone levels are so high because in the blood was a testosterone derivative called equipoise. And I believe, Steve, from if I remember, because we did the show on this particular individual, it was something like 2,000 nanograms of deciliter. So, it was like that. They thought that the equipoise had caused this really high level, and yet he died. He didn't die because his high testosterone levels specifically, but it was a result, arguably, of the stress that he was putting his body under. And the fact of the matter is, just because he was on high T and using steroids, he may not have had, and we've seen this before, a healthy lifestyle, because being a top professional bodybuilder is not arguably as healthy as it should be. But again, not everybody listening to this show is a pro. Most of you can be amateurs, recreational lifters, etc., and you're looking to enhance how you feel with the testosterone levels you got, how to boost those testosterone levels. And then again, as we're going to get into now, before the show finishes, Steve, the effects of steroids on your body, specifically on your testosterone levels. And I'll start this and I'll let Steve jump in. It's kind of obvious, but sometimes, and again, we may be a small percentage of people who've seen argue about this. If I take testosterone level, will it suppress my own lateral levels? Yes, absolutely. Steve talked about the primitive man. I talked about the primitive man. And what we said that the body doesn't need to produce testosterone because you're fat, because you don't need to go hunt, and so on and so forth. The same thing applies here. If you use anabolic steroids, the body will not produce, it will suppress natural production. At the same time, and this is again a key point here, if you can do the things that we talked about earlier on, you will get better responses. That is, become more muscular than if you hadn't done the things we talked about, stronger than you would just using testosterone if you hadn't done the things that we've talked about. So it's super, super important. Talk about that, talk about specifically the reasons for suppression, Steve, because you're way, way better of an expert on this than
Yeah,
I am.
and like in part two, we're gonna get into how to boost your free testosterone specifically when you're using anabolic steroids, and then in part three, we're gonna hit on even more anabolic steroid choices. But here, before we even understand that, we have to understand what happens when you use anabolic steroids and how they affect your testosterone levels. So obviously, when you use testosterone derivatives, exogenous testosterone, Mobster talked about equipoise, for example, and the bodybuilder whose autopsy, his testosterone levels were sky high. He was on a boatload of equipoise, 2,000, 300,000 milligrams a week going into his show. And his autopsy, his testosterone levels were sky high, not because he was on exogenous testosterone, because he wasn't, but he was on these other steroids, which caused his testosterone levels to be elevated. So, exogenous testosterone derivatives can and will show up. Nandrolone, for example, will show up. Dianabol may even show up in a lot of tests, depending on which test you get. So you got to remember that, you have to factor that in as well. So what happens when you use anabolic steroids? Any anabolic steroid that you use, your body will realize, hey, I'm getting way too much exogenous hormone. So when you go and you order your EuroPharmacies testosterone, or you go order your EuroPharmacies Equipoise or Primo or Tren, whatever, Proviron, Anavar, whatever you decide to order, and you start taking those, your body's going to realize, hey, I have way too much hormones. So I'm going to the pituitary glands in your body are going to obviously go dormant and shut down while you're on the anabolic steroids. In the process, though, guess what happens to your free testosterone? It's going to go up because these anabolic steroids do a really good job of binding to SHBG, which we're going to discuss on part two. And I'm giving you a little preview of part two of this episode, which is going to be Evo Hardcore 2.0, episode 66.
Yep.
But what happens is your free testosterone goes up, your ratio of free testosterone versus your
Yes.
total hormones also go up quite a bit.
Super
And
important.
and that's actually obviously why when you use anabolic steroids, you have an easier time building muscle, building strength, losing body fat, and all those good things that we want to happen in our body. So EuroPharmacies, they got you covered with their excellent anabolic steroids in that situation. So um, listen, at the end of the day, if you're going to use anabolic steroids, it's very important to run a post psychotherapy that gives you a soft landing when you come off. Because again,
Yes.
when you come off, the hormones leave your system. Now you're left with no hormones. Your body's not producing hormones and you're not getting it exogenously. So PCT gives you a soft landing. It allows your pituitary glands to get stimulated and start producing hormones again. Then your body will start the recovery phase and your body will transition from being on cycle to PCT to being off cycle, and your total testosterone and your free testosterone will begin to bounce back afterwards. So it's very important. That's another aspect. It's very important to make sure if you're going to keep a healthy HPTA, you make sure you take time off from anabolic steroids if you're not making the decision to just stay on TRT for the rest of your life or HRT. So that's another aspect to remember. So it's normal. What I'm trying to say is normal. Tail end the PCT or beginning of PCT and then going into your recovery phase in between cycles. It can be
Yes.
normal for a period of time to have your total and free testosterone levels being a little low, but they will bounce back, assuming that you're cycling on and off properly. Touch on that a bit, Mobster, and then give us a quick preview of what people can expect on the next episode before we talk a little bit more about EuroPharmacies.
Yeah, I mean, there's arguments to be made for receptor uptake and receptor refreshing and whatever else, and I've actually touched upon that on the forums. But the bottom line is this: you will get a better response to your cycle the longer you're off. whether that's 3 months, 6 months, or even a couple of years. I've seen people ask about doing a new cycle, and you go, what was the last cycle? Oh, it was 3 years ago. Then during the last cycle you did will work fantastically. You've had so much time off. The longer you're off, the better you PCT, the better response you'll get. Obviously, it can be frustrating, and I would include myself here, Steve, and yourself as well, of course, if we want to do a couple of cycles a year, that we made a particular choice for something that takes a long time to clear the system. But the bottom line is, again, it's that the argument between free and bound testosterone, and it's less likely that you respond as well if you don't take enough time off, if you didn't do a proper PCT. And what are both of those things? That a proper PCT is going to arguably mean your Leydig cells, your ability to produce your own testosterone is healthier. I'll reiterate again, right? So if your diet is poor, fix the diet. If you're not training enough, fix the training. You need to get out in the fresh air, guys. I understand if it's raining, and I see that as an excuse to go and hit the treadmill when you'd be better off running on soft grass somewhere up the local park, out in the sunshine, in the fresh air. It has an effect. Reducing, if you can, the stress in your life. When you do go on cycle, and we'll specifically cover what would benefit that cycle in part 2, when we talk about Masteron and Proviron from EuroPharmacies and the effect that they can have on free testosterone. But when you do go on cycle, decent, don't have to go crazy with pro-like numbers. You don't have to run 16, 20, 18, 20. I've seen longer sometimes, but 20 plus week cycles. Shorter seems to be better than the longer ones, gives you more time to recover. And obviously, getting the most from that cycle. Guys, I mean, just on the money side alone, if you're dropping $1,000 on the cycle, and then your other bits and pieces that you need to do to make the cycle, so let's call it $1,300-1,400. Let's get your money's worth. Let's get the maximum best possible results we can from that. So when we talk, as Steve said in part 2, about the benefits of Masteron and Proviron, and specifically the benefits they have on free testosterone, that's going to be the focus for part 2. So these things that you can do, getting sleep, eating a healthier lifestyle, having a better diet, exercising better, being outside in the sunshine, and so on and so forth, will boost your free testosterone, the testosterone levels, full stop, but specifically free testosterone, the longer you're off cycle, and then the addition of Masteron or Proviron from EuroPharmacies to your cycle as a means of freeing up more free testosterone and enhancing the results you're going to get from that cycle is where it's going to come in and where it's going to be beneficial in the way that you want it to be. If you need to ask us questions, post comments below, come onto the forums and ask questions, get us to explain things better that we might have tripped over when we're doing the show, so that we can better understand and better educate you yourselves, and giving us indicators for your lifestyle, things that we can help you fix with, and so on and so forth, and even just understanding your bloods and the difference between free and bound testosterone. Please come on the forums and check us out. Please note, we are not doctors and opinions are ours. It's our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.